Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. Can you hear those jingle bells in the distance? Do you smell the cinnamon and pine filling the air? That's right, the Christmas season is here, and we have something extra special planned for you. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going on the most incredible adventure through time to discover the true story of Santa Claus. This isn't just about reindeer and toy workshops. This is about real history, real miracles, and real people whose kindness changed the world forever. Today, in part 1, we're traveling back almost 1,700 years to meet the actual person who started it all. So grab your coziest blanket, pour yourself some hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, and let's journey together to the ancient Mediterranean world, where our story begins with a baby born into extraordinary circumstances. Our story begins around the year 270 AD in the ancient city of Patara, located in a region called Lycia. Today, this area is part of Turkey, but back then, it was a bustling port city in the Roman Empire. The world was very different then. No electricity, no cars, no computers. People traveled by foot, by horse, or by sailing ship across the beautiful blue Mediterranean Sea. In this ancient city, a wealthy couple named Epiphanius and Johanna had been praying for years to have a child. They were devoted Christians during a time when following Jesus was actually dangerous. Christians faced persecution from Roman authorities. Yet this couple held firm to their faith, attending secret church gatherings and helping their community. After many years of prayer, their miracle arrived. A baby boy they named Nicholas, which means victory of the people. From the very beginning, little Nicholas was special. Ancient accounts tell us that even as an infant, Nicholas showed signs of unusual devotion. Stories say he would fast on Wednesdays and Fridays, taking milk from his mother only in the evenings on those days. Now, we can't verify every detail from so long ago, but these stories show us how people recognized something extraordinary about Nicholas from his earliest days. As Nicholas grew, his parents noticed his tender heart and deep spirituality. While other children played games in the streets of Patara, young Nicholas was often found in prayer or helping neighbors in need. His parents, being wealthy merchants, made sure Nicholas received an excellent education. He learned to read and write, skills that not everyone had in those days, and he studied the scriptures with great dedication. Nicholas's uncle was a bishop, a leader in the Christian church, in the nearby city of Myra. This uncle took special interest in young Nicholas, teaching him about faith, service, and leadership. Can you imagine what it must have been like? This young boy sitting at his uncle's feet, listening to stories about Jesus, learning about compassion and mercy, soaking it all in like a sponge. But Nicholas's comfortable childhood was about to face a tremendous challenge. When Nicholas was still quite young, historians believe he was probably a teenager, a terrible plague swept through the region. This disease, which we can't identify for certain today, took the lives of many people, including Nicholas's beloved parents. Imagine the heartbreak. This young man, who had grown up surrounded by love and comfort, suddenly found himself an orphan. But here's where Nicholas's true character shone through like a brilliant star on a dark night. When Nicholas's parents died, they left him a considerable inheritance. In those days, this meant houses, land, businesses, gold, silver, and valuable goods. Nicholas was suddenly one of the wealthiest young men in the entire region. He could have lived a life of luxury, never working a day, enjoying every comfort imaginable. But Nicholas remembered his parents' faith. He remembered Jesus' words about loving your neighbor, about caring for the poor, about storing up treasures in heaven rather than on earth. And Nicholas made a choice that would echo through the centuries. He decided to give it all away. But Nicholas didn't just throw open his doors and hand out money randomly. No, he was thoughtful and prayerful about it. He wanted to help people in truly meaningful ways, and he wanted to do it secretly, so that God would receive the glory, not himself. This humility, this desire to serve without recognition, became Nicholas's trademark. Now we come to the most famous story about St. Nicholas, the one that would eventually inspire one of our most beloved Christmas traditions. In the city where Nicholas lived, there was a nobleman who had fallen on desperately hard times. This man, who had once been wealthy and respected, had lost everything. His wife had died, and he was left alone to care for his 3 beautiful daughters. In those ancient times, young women needed a dowry to get married, essentially money or property that the bride's family would give to help the new couple start their life together. Without a dowry, these 3 sisters had virtually no hope of finding husbands. And in that culture, at that time, an unmarried woman with no family wealth faced a terrible future. The father was so desperate and despairing that, according to the old accounts, he was considering selling his daughters into servitude just so they could survive. When Nicholas heard about this family's plight, his heart broke for them. He knew he had to help, but he didn't want to embarrass the proud father by offering charity openly. So Nicholas came up with a plan. Late one night, when the whole city was asleep and the streets were dark and quiet, Nicholas crept through the shadows to the nobleman's house. The windows were open to let in the cool night breeze. Remember, this was long before air conditioning. Nicholas reached into his cloak, pulled out a heavy bag filled with gold coins, and tossed it through the window. Can you picture it? The bag sailing through the dark, landing with a soft thump inside the house. Some versions of this story say the bag landed in a stocking that was hanging by the fireplace to dry. Others say it landed in a shoe that had been left by the hearth. Either way, when the family woke up the next morning and discovered the gold, they were absolutely amazed. They had no idea who their mysterious benefactor was, but they praised God for the miracle. The father was able to provide a proper dowry for his eldest daughter, who soon married and began a happy life. But Nicholas wasn't finished. He had 3 daughters to help after all. So, sometime later, he waited until deep night once again. Once more, he crept through the dark streets of the city. Once more approached the house, and once more tossed a bag of gold through the window. You can imagine the father's astonishment. Once could be a miracle, but twice? Now the second daughter could marry, and the father's joy was immeasurable. But he was also desperately curious. Who was this mysterious gift giver? The father determined that when it came time for the 3rd daughter, he would stay awake and discover his benefactor's identity. So he kept watch, night after night, waiting and wondering. Sure enough, Nicholas came a 3rd time. As he approached the house with the final bag of gold, the father was ready. The moment Nicholas tossed the bag through the window, the father rushed out and caught him before he could disappear into the night. Nicholas was embarrassed. Remember, he wanted to give anonymously. But the father fell at his feet, weeping with gratitude, calling him a servant of God, and wanting to tell everyone what Nicholas had done. Nicholas made the father promise to keep the secret during his lifetime. He didn't want praise or recognition. He only wanted to serve God by helping others. The father agreed, but after Nicholas eventually passed away, the story came out and it spread like wildfire throughout the Christian world. Nicholas's secret couldn't stay hidden forever, not because the nobleman broke his promise, but because Nicholas performed so many acts of kindness that people began to recognize his special spirit. His generosity, his wisdom, and his deep faith became known throughout the region. When Nicholas was still a young man, the Bishop of Myra, the city where his uncle had served, passed away. The church leaders gathered to choose a new bishop, and according to tradition, they prayed for God to guide them to the right person. The story tells us that the senior church leaders were told in visions to choose the first man named Nicholas, who entered the church the next morning. Who do you think walked through those church doors at dawn? That's right, our Nicholas. He had come early, as was his custom, to pray. When the church leaders told him he had been chosen as the new bishop, Nicholas was humble and hesitant. He didn't feel worthy of such an important position. But the people insisted, and Nicholas accepted, seeing it as God's will. As Bishop of Myra, Nicholas became even more devoted to serving his community. He lived simply, giving away most of his income to help the poor. He became known as a defender of the innocent, a protector of children, a friend to sailors and travelers, and a fearless advocate for justice. During Nicholas's time as bishop, many miraculous stories emerged. One famous account tells of a terrible famine that struck the region. A ship carrying grain to the emperor docked in Myra's harbor. Nicholas asked the sailors to share some of their cargo to help the starving people. The sailors were afraid. The grain had been carefully measured, and they would be in serious trouble if they arrived with less than expected. Nicholas assured them that if they helped, they would not be held accountable. Trusting the holy bishop, the sailors unloaded a significant amount of grain when they reached their destination. The ship's cargo measured exactly the same as when they had started. Meanwhile, the grain Nicholas had received fed the people of Myra for 2 years and provided seed for planting. Another beloved story tells of 3 young boys who were tragically murdered by an evil innkeeper. Nicholas, through prayer and God's power, restored these boys to life. This miracle especially established Nicholas as the patron saint of children, and it's why children throughout history have felt such a special connection to St. Nicholas. Nicholas lived during a particularly difficult time for Christians. The Roman Emperor Diocletian launched one of the most severe persecutions against Christians in history. Many believers were imprisoned, tortured, or killed for their faith. Nicholas, as a prominent Christian leader, was arrested and thrown into prison. But even in chains, even facing possible death, Nicholas continued to minister to others. He encouraged fellow prisoners, led prayers, and shared his faith boldly. Historical records suggest he bore the scars of this persecution for the rest of his life. When Constantine became emperor and ended the persecution of Christians, Nicholas was finally released. He returned to Myra, where his people welcomed him as a hero of the faith. In the year 325 AD, something very important happened in Christian history. Emperor Constantine called together bishops from all over the known world to settle disputes about Christian doctrine and to establish clear statements of belief. This gathering, known as the Council of Nicaea, brought together about 300 church leaders. Nicholas was among them. Can you imagine? This man who had started as an orphan boy in Patara, who had given away his fortune to help 3 sisters, who had suffered in prison for his faith, was now participating in one of the most significant meetings in church history. There's a dramatic legend, though historians debate whether it actually happened, that during heated debates at the council, Nicholas became so passionate about defending the truth about Jesus Christ that he struck another bishop who was teaching false doctrines. Whether this story is accurate or not, it shows us that Nicholas was a man of deep conviction who cared intensely about truth and faith. Nicholas served as Bishop of Myra for many decades, continuing his ministry of generosity and compassion until his death on December 6th, around the year 343 AD. He was buried in his cathedral church in Myra, and almost immediately, his tomb became a place of pilgrimage. People travelled from far and wide to pray at Nicholas's tomb, and many reported miracles occurring there. A mysterious liquid, which believers called manna or myrrh, was said to seep from his tomb and have healing properties. Whether you believe in these miracles or not, they show us how deeply Nicholas was loved and how powerfully his example of Christian charity touched people's hearts. The bishop who had lived so humbly, who had given so freely, who had served so faithfully, became one of the most celebrated saints in all of Christian history. Churches were dedicated to him, icons were painted showing his kind face, and his feast day, December 6th, became a major celebration throughout the Christian world. And this, friends, is where our journey today ends, but it's really just the beginning. We've met the real Nicholas, walked the streets of ancient Myra, witnessed his incredible generosity, and seen how his faith shaped every aspect of his life. But how did this bishop from ancient Turkey become the jolly Santa Claus we know today? How did his story travel across oceans and centuries? How did stockings, reindeer, and the North Pole enter the picture? That's what we'll discover in part 2 of our journey, when we'll see how St. Nicholas's legend spread across Europe, taking on new forms in different countries, inspiring countless traditions, and eventually sailing across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World. Until then, maybe you can try living a little bit like St. Nicholas this week. Look for someone who needs help. Maybe a kind word, maybe a small gift, maybe just your time and attention. And remember, the best gifts are those given with love, expecting nothing in return. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you loved learning about the real St. Nicholas, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe so you don't miss parts 2 and 3. Leave a comment telling us what surprised you most about St. Nicholas's real story. Merry Christmas, everyone, and may the spirit of giving fill your hearts this season.